And as if you were listening a few minutes ago to the what we call the tease before the program, just as we come out of the 7 o'clock hour, you've always got to qualify these things. You've always got to say, well, not all Muslims are bad. No, just several 100 million of them are horrid, horrid people. And we're seeing more of that on display today in Belgium. And it doesn't get a lot better. We've got Associated Press says 31 people dead. Drudge says 34. What usually happens in these situations is some of the people who had their arms or legs blown off or were filled with shrapnel during these attacks, they'll die in the next few days. So this death toll is obviously going to go much, much higher. And you've got, of course, the liberals all jumping up and down saying, but it's the religion of peace. It's the religion of peace. It's the religion of peace. And we're better than that. We need to have them come to this country and settle here and show them what loving people we are. And then we'll never have to worry about it happening here. 7 minutes after 8 o'clock. Bill Colley with you on Top Story on News Radio 1310 KLIX and newsradio1310.com. President Limprest is going to be addressing some folks in Cuba in a few minutes. He'll also make mention of what's going on. I say that because some of you may, that's the headline in the lead editorial today at the Washington Examiner. After finishing a news conference yesterday where he agreed with communist dictator Raul Castro, Castro grabbed Mr. Obama by one of his arms and held up their arms together, and there's Mr. Obama's hand hanging limply there. So the Washington Examiner today called him Limprest. And it's that type of response and that type of reputation that has left us in this situation in the Western world because nobody wants to address the trouble here. Nobody wants to address the problem here. You could turn that rock in Mecca into a radioactive piece of glass, and you'd send a really, really strong message to these people. But people would say, well, that's too far. All right, then what do? Well, tell you what. You go in and you take those mother of all bombs, the big Moabs as they were called during the previous war, and you go in and you scatter them all over the tops of the heads of ISIS and Al-Qaeda, wherever you may find those people. What you tell them is this. Every time there's an attack, well, we'll start this way. We'll respond with 2 attacks on you. If you come back with another attack, we're going to square that. It'll be 4 attacks on you. If you come back and attack us a 3rd time, there'll be 16 attacks. And this is the way it's going to go from now on, because we have the weaponry right now and the power to do that. We may not have it in another 20 years or so. But you will quiet these people relatively fast. All this, well, no, you only create more terrorists. No, you don't. What you do is you create graves. And nobody comes back from the grave and attacks you. 36 right now. We're on our way today only into the lower to mid-40s. A cooler stretch of weather coming here in the middle of the week before we warm up very gradually as we head toward Good Friday and, of course, Easter Sunday. This threat of terrorism, of course, is what they live with now in Europe on a daily basis. These European cities, some of them have millions of Muslims who've migrated there, and they've been allowed to move in and create their own enclaves, and they do not play well with others. They've come, and what they'd like to do is they would like to deliver their own culture to the rest of Europe, and eventually to North America, and eventually to have that worldwide caliphate. This is the mayor of London, England, speaking this morning, Boris Johnson. And he doesn't believe, of course, this is the politically correct thing to say, he doesn't believe that this today is part of a wider conspiracy.
We are stepping up a presence at transport hubs and at major airports, but that is purely for the purpose of reassurance and doesn't reflect any intelligence that we have about a threat to London. Everybody obviously is very distressed at the scenes from Brussels. Our thoughts are very much with the victims, their families in Belgium. But I want to stress that we have no intelligence that suggests there's any imminent plan against this city.
Okay, but they've already been attacked in London. That was, 10 years ago when the subway was bombed? I was going to an amusement park that day with my daughter and niece, and I had just gotten out of bed, finished my breakfast, and the news broke on that story. And we've had attacks now in Paris. Now we've had them in Belgium, where when he says there's no wider conspiracy, there's a constant conspiracy that's going on here. And I still believe that shutdown of the Washington, D.C. Metro last week, scheduled for exactly 29 hours, was a cover story because these people may well have been looking to attack the tube in this country, that is, the subway system in our nation's capital. They didn't get away with it, obviously. We'll never perhaps hear any more details about that. But it could well be someone who went in and either swept up bombs or they went in looking for them under the excuse that, well, we had a problem with a rail and we wanted to avoid a fire. And you know what? I'm used to hearing a lot of cover stories. I had a friend, he worked many, many years ago on a project. They were working on some underground bunkers in Washington. Yes, they exist for a great many people in government. And what they were doing is they were trying to test some of their equipment, and they decided to blow some compressed air, a lot of it, through this one section that they were building. They blew a manhole cover off, which happened to be underneath a car, which lifted the car 10 feet in the air. So they came up with a cover story because they didn't want to tell people. This was back in the 1980s. They didn't want to tell people exactly what they were up to because you don't telegraph that back in the day to the Soviet Union. Today, you wouldn't want to telegraph these things to ISIS or its affiliates. Also, we have this. Alex Rossi with Sky News was one of the first people on the scene this morning at the airport in Brussels, Belgium.
We saw a number of people coming out towards us, looking very distressed, very shocked. One woman I saw had blood running down her head. Great deal of confusion. People didn't, of course, not know what was going on. I think most people I spoke to, initially they couldn't comprehend it.
They couldn't comprehend it. 2 explosions at the airport, one at a subway terminal close by the European Union headquarters. Now, folks, these are well-planned and well-thought-out attacks, and I'll tell you what, for all of the talk about all of our great security in the Western world, and don't worry, these will become just, a few and far between, or we'll have to learn to live with them. The funny thing is, Lefty, when there's a shooting at a school, Lefty says, one dead child is too many. But when you have a terrorist attack and you've got 35 people dead, all of a sudden Lefty says, well, we're going to have to live with that because we're such nice, kind people. We'll have to learn to live with that, and this is an acceptable loss because it makes me feel good in my tummy when I say those things. You're up next. You're on the air with Bill Colley on Top Story on KLIX.
Bill, in view of what happened in Brussels last night, I wonder if it isn't time for the people in this community who have supported the refugee program and still do to take a second look and reconsider what they might be importing into this area. I agree that there are, I think the majority of the Muslim people are good, but the radical people exist. It's a worldwide assault on all the things that we stand for. I think that the people here are they're fine people and they want to do good. But I think, how do we know how many of those people?
Question. We've been asking that for the last 11 months.
Well, maybe we need to organize and have a demonstration or some damn thing, but I don't think that people fully realize.
Well, very true. I thank you very much for the telephone call. I've seen video of local officials greeting some of these refugees at the airport here in Twin Falls, passing gifts out to them. In one case, somebody sent me the video and joked. They said, here's a man, and he's supposedly with his wife and his 2 much older teenage daughters, hinting that perhaps the teenage daughters were actually wives 2 and 3. But, they're not looking to change our culture whatsoever. You're up next. You're on the air at 8:15 with Bill Colley on Top Story, and welcome to News Radio 1310 KLIX.
Good morning, Bill. The thing that most people still don't realize that Islam, or I should say all Muslims are not terrorists, but all terrorists are Muslims, and that they follow the Quran, and that Islam is a complete political, legal, economic, military, social, and cultural entity posing as a religion. Until we wake up to that fact, we're going to have more and more of these terrorist things around the world, and it's coming to a neighborhood near you. It's just and they will not assimilate into those countries. Instead, they want separate and distinct cultures, not subject to the laws of the land, but to impose their Sharia law when they get in a majority. So this is just, the beginning until we shut this thing down and stop all Muslims from coming into this country, because we don't know who they are because they're not vetted properly. We already know that. They've already admitted that.
Well, thank you for the call. And on top of that, we should point out that Representative Raul Labrador was among those people voting in the House last week. And the House did pass this legislation, moving forward with it, that would give local communities a say in these refugee resettlement programs. Because right now, whenever you ask one of your local officials, they quickly wash their hands, Pontius Pilate style, and say, can't do anything about it. Sorry. Yeah, but what's your opinion on it? Oh, can't do anything about it. Yeah, but are you for it or against it? Oh, can't do anything about it. How many times did we have people, when this was raging here in this community, did we have members of your local city council in Twin Falls sitting in the chair next to me, and that question would come up from a telephone caller, and that would be the answer. Oh, can't do anything about it. Let me wash my hands. Can't do anything about it. Sorry, can't do anything about it. Lots of people here hiring them for cheap labor. Yep, giving me campaign contributions. Oh, I didn't mean that. Sorry, can't do anything about it. Well, you know what? Raul Labrador has been voting on this, and we've got this bill. If it passes the Senate and goes to President Limprest's desk, maybe he'll sign it. And then maybe the local folks can actually grow a pair and do something about this. Because I'm telling you right now, that referendum coming up in this community in May is going to embarrass them. This notion, oh, well, you know, obviously the public are all knuckle draggers. I do want the public's vote, and I would like the knuckle dragger to vote for me. But on the other hand, please let your betters here at City Hall handle these issues for you. Because you're all really just a bunch of dumb dummies. I mean, frankly, some of you are supporting Donald Trump. Isn't that obvious? So this is what you've got going on right now. You've got a government at the local level. You've got a government in many cases at the state level, and in many cases at the federal level, which is running counter to the will of the people, the overwhelming majority of Americans. And at some point, you're going to have to take it back from them because they will not give it up willingly, and they're going to continue to do what they think they should do, and that is appease all of their liberal buddies that they go to their cocktail parties with. They want to rub elbows with all of their liberal friends over at CSI and these other places, and that's what they really care about, mostly care about. You, they just want your vote. As long as they get your vote, then they can ignore you for a few years in between. We're coming up on 20 minutes after 8 o'clock. Bill Colley with you on Top Story on News Radio 1310 KLIX and News. We even had a couple of Republicans in the state legislature who voted this week against using the Bible as a reference in schools in this state. They could go down to their local board of elections at any time and change their registration to liberal, because there is a liberal party in Idaho, and it's called the Democrats. And if they'd like to go party and play with the Democrats, then maybe that's what they should be doing as well. We've got more on the way. Steve Millington will be joining us, too, as well this morning. He's the chairman of the Twin Falls County Republican Party. His opponents, the Democrats, in fact, actually have a caucus throughout the state of Idaho today. And there's a lot of other news going on. We've got caucuses in places like Utah. We've got primaries in places like Arizona. Could be a big day, in fact, on the national level for Ted Cruz. Don't hold your breath, but you never know. All of that coming up.